Hello and good evening, everyone. Now, I told y'all this was going to be a power packed week, and I was going to be talking to six authors in 5 days. Initially, we were hoping it was going to be seven, but one was a little under the weather, so we decided to reschedule, and they'll be joining us actually early next month. So, all right. If this is your first time coming to Planners Knowledge, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. And if you are a return visitor, hello and welcome back. And of course, I'm so happy to have you here. So, here at Planners Knowledge, I am Dr. Kathleen Walls, your host, and I interview authors from various genres, backgrounds, and so forth. And we learn about their author's journey. Now, yes, we do talk about their book as well, which is great because this gives you an opportunity to learn new books that are out there, but also to learn about the author's journey. And hopefully, there will be something educational and inspirational and motivational for you if you are thinking about writing, if you've been contemplating it, as well as if you know anyone else who needs that little bit of encouragement. So, tonight I am super excited to have a guest that I met a few weeks ago at an author's event. Her name is Chrysa Smith, and so I'm going to bring her up on screen now. There she is. Good
Hi,
evening, Chrysa. How are
good
you?
evening. Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good,
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
my pleasure.
All right. So let's let the people know a little bit about you as we get ready to move into your author's journey. So let's give yourself a brief introduction.
A brief introduction. Okay, I've been writing, well, you're probably going to ask me this anyway, but I've been writing since eighth grade.
Okay.
And there was an experience that happened to me, which is why I'm doing it.
Okay.
But it's been a very circuitous route to what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing now. It's not been a straight line by any means. I never really thought about being an author, it just sort of fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
So I live in Bucks County,
Okay.
Pennsylvania. Have a dog, my husband, and 9 books now. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
All right. So eighth grade, it started. What was what happened? What made you choose to start writing? And if you don't want to get into the actual event, that's fine. But what made you choose to write?
Well, I always liked to play with words.
Okay.
So even when I was little. So in eighth grade, there was a writing contest at school, and it was the entire school, and I won the writing contest.
Okay.
And it was pretty exciting. And I thought, I kind of like doing this.
Hmm.
Um, and I went on more and more. And, of course, in high school, I loved essay tests because I
You could
could
write.
talk my way through anything. So that was great. And then, all my jobs since college really had to do with writing, even though
Hmm.
I did not major in English or journalism. I
Hmm.
wound up writing in all my jobs. Yeah.
Interesting. So you saw that theme very early on that this writing piece was a strength of yours.
It was. And it came through in, like I said, in all my jobs. I started out with a business degree.
Hmm.
And I started out working in a business job, but I could write the newsletter and I could
Yes.
write the letter and I could
Yes.
do all of that. And eventually I wound up in a magazine, and then ultimately freelancing for magazines, which I still do as well as write
Okay.
children's books.
Okay.
So it's just a little bit of everything, like PR writing, advertising, brochures,
Hmm.
the whole 9 yards. And so now I like to tell people, when I'm done with the nonfiction adult stuff, then I have fun with the fiction for children.
Yes, yes. Well, now tell me this. When you were younger and after that eighth grade experience, was there ever a time that you thought about being an author, that you wanted to be a professional writer?
I'm sorry, there goes my dog.
It's all right.
No. When I thought about writing, could I do this? I'm thinking starving writer, like starving artist.
Uh-huh.
I don't think this is good roofing.
Yes.
Someone said, "Hey, Bailey." Shh. Okay, sorry about that.
It is all right. I have an animal care center, so I know what it's like to have barking, and usually there's a cat rolling by as well. So
That's funny. That's funny. So, where were we?
so you were saying that you connected writing with being a starving artist.
Oh, a starving artist, starving writer.
Yes.
Yeah. So I put myself towards a different career path, and actually I
Mhm.
started out in psych of all
Oh,
things.
welcome.
You too.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
right. And then that sort of I got like turned off by that.
Okay.
Like actually one professor said, unless you're going to get a master's or a doctorate, like you're probably
Mhm.
wasting your time. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, I don't see myself doing that. So I wound up in marketing, and it's really been a big help with the
Mhm.
books.
Mhm.
It's really given me a one up, I think, on a
I
lot of
think so
authors,
too. Yeah.
because a lot of authors really they're focused on writing fiction, nonfiction, whatever. They're not focused on the marketing aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. You're absolutely right because whenever I speak with authors and knowing my own journey, I don't come from a marketing background, so that's a learning curve
It is,
and a
and
comfort curve. Go
even
ahead.
if you came from the marketing background, it's still a challenge, to market yourself
Yourself.
in part.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. So I'm so happy that you pointed out this starving artist piece because I think that sits, you talked about psych. I think that sits in a lot of people's unconscious and subconscious,
Hmm.
and they don't think about it, obviously, but it plays a part in how much they're really going to delve into this possibility of being an author
Right.
and going down this author's path. And the fact that it was in the forefront of your mind and it was like, well, I'm not interested in being starving. So let me let me
Right.
pick something that will provide me with what I need. However, I am aware that this is a strength and something that I enjoy. So how can I still get it in my life?
Exactly. And it just sort. Of flowed into it.
Hmm.
Like I said, all the jobs sort of one flowed into another, and ultimately here I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing. So, okay, so you said you did communications, you did writing there, you did some freelance writing. Tell us a little bit about the freelance writing that you've done.
Well, I started out doing commercial stuff, so it wasn't very interesting.
Hmm.
Quite honestly, it was corporate type products, and yeah, nothing fun like writing
Okay.
for children. And then ultimately I wound up at a magazine, and I was doing sales promotion again. It was
Oh, wow.
marketing related. And then they saw that I could write, and they
Hmm.
asked me to be a co-editor in of the magazine. And I
Hmm.
really enjoyed that. I thought it was great. And
Hmm.
from there, I started doing a little freelancing from the magazines that I knew. I got some opportunities there. And then I stretched out and started to kind of pursue more interesting writing. So
Hmm.
right now, I actually write about home and interior
Oh,
uh,
wow.
type of type of articles. I have a style column actually in a magazine, in Bucks County Magazine,
Okay.
out of the Philly suburbs.
Yes.
So that is great fun to do.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's the poodles and there's the
Yeah, so
other stories.
how did you make that transition from that now into the poodles and the children's books and so forth? And I can't wait to hear about these poodles.
Okay. Well, I tell kids when I go to schools that when you have a lot of homework or you have no homework, which is better, right? No homework. Well, when I had no articles to write, I was like bored, and I started watching my dogs, and I thought I hadn't paid attention to the funny things they were doing.
Hmm.
So I caught one event,
Yes.
and I thought, you know what? I bet kids would like hearing about this because it was funny. So I
Mhm.
went back and I took a couple of children's writing classes. There was a writer's room here in
Mhm.
Bucks County, and they were very encouraging. They said, you should do something with this. So
Mhm.
ultimately, I have a friend who's an illustrator, and she's been my illustrator through all my books.
Oh, that's nice.
And we sort of like teamed up and said, let's do it. So we did. And the rest is history, as they say.
All right. And so when was the first book?
First book was 2007.
Okay.
And that was the case of the missing steak bone, a mystery that happened in my house. And so that one was actually based on reality.
Uh-huh.
And then I started to write more books because I got more dogs.
Oh.
So at one point I had 3 dogs at one time.
Oh my.
And when I was looking for the title for the series, it became a series. I was walking 3 dogs and I looked really ridiculous. And a neighbor said to me, now you have a posse of dogs. And so when I decided to name it, it became The Adventures of the Poodle Posse.
Oh.
And as I got more dogs, there were more stories.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, let's see. You have the books nearby. Let's take a look at the missing steak cover first, and then we'll move into the Adventures of the Poodle. Okay, there we go. Lift it up just a little bit. Oh my goodness.
There we go. So the woman on the front is the owner in the stories, and she's loosely based on me.
Okay.
Although, like I tell kids, only much older.
Yeah.
But she never knows what's going on with her dogs in the story. She's kind of wifty.
Yeah.
And they're doing all sorts of things, and she has no clue.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. All right. People got a picture. Okay. So therefore they know. And where can they purchase these books?
They can purchase these either on Amazon or through my website, which is wellbredbook.net.
Okay, so I'll be sure to put that in the chat so people can go to it. Okay, so so it ended up becoming a series. Now, when you first started, you can put the book down.
Okay.
So when you started writing that one, when did you know it was going to grow into a series?
It did very well. Actually, I printed with a local printer first 500 copies because I had to do volume in order to get a decent price per book.
Yeah, yeah.
And those went rather quickly. And so then I printed 1,000 and then those went.
Wow.
So I thought, this is kind of a great thing and lots of fun. And I was having different experiences with my dogs. And I thought, let me capture these. And then eventually it was just my imagination that took over. And it wasn't even things that happened. It was like, wow, what if this dog's personality was this way and this happened? What would it be? So yeah.
Oh my goodness. So now here you are. So the first one comes out, the first part of the series comes out, you start paying attention, and what now becomes your writing process?
My process. Well, I roll the idea around for a while and I make myself notes. I take paper with me everywhere. So when I get an idea, I write something down so I don't forget it. And then I basically sit there with a pad and write it by hand. And then it goes into the computer, goes to an editor. But I don't know. I just sit there and create, which is just what I've been used to. Yeah.
And so it started out with the dogs really being the muse and the inspiration for it. But now would you say it's gotten to a point where the stories are coming to you and through you at this point, even without necessarily watching them?
Well, actually, I have ended the Poodle Posse series.
Oh, you did? Okay.
It's 5 books, and I've stopped writing about poodles for a while.
All right.
Yeah. So, you know what? I did the first book about the missing steak bone. I did a book about going to the beach with the dogs because that happened too. But what happened in the story was not quite what happened, in reality. So my imagination took over. And then after that, I did holiday stories.
Oh,
so I did a Halloween book called Creepy Tales. I did a Groundhog Day book called Trouble Down Under.
Oh,
Because you know where one of the poodles winds up in this one. He's the wild one. And then I did a Christmas book called A Very Merry Mixed Up Christmas.
oh.
And that was the end of the series so far. And I kind of wanted to do something different.
Yes.
And I was inspired by something that happened to do something different after that.
Okay. Do tell.
Yeah.
All right. So now, so that was what, 6 books altogether?
That
so
was
far?
5. Actually, that was 5. And what I did after that is there is one more poodle book, but I went back and wrote a prequel because I thought, you know what? I never really told the story of how the first 2 dogs met. And it's in Once
Oh,
Upon a Poodle.
Chrysa.
So this is for younger children. It's more of a read aloud story. So we get them early with this
Yes.
one. And then they go into the Poodle Posse series.
Oh my God. Can we see some of the pictures? Because you said your friend has been the one to illustrate everything.
Sure. I will show you one of my favorite pictures that she did.
Mm-hmm.
When the dog tries to find a brother and he brings in characters into the house. He winds up bringing in a goose.
Oh.
And all you know what breaks loose in the house. But I love that picture because it's funny.
Oh, so good.
And she did a good job. And I also say there's another picture that I just love. So these are my 2 favorite. It's in another book, but it takes place in New York in the subway.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
is another favorite picture.
How phenomenal.
Now she has done cartoons for the New Yorker magazine.
Okay.
So she's pretty accomplished.
Yeah.
But she loves doing children's work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm lucky to have her.
You sure are. She's an incredible. Please tell her, love her work. So incredible.
Will do.
Yes. So, all right. So now you had the prequel, you have the steak one, you have the Poodle Posse. What is that taking us to? That's 7. So we got 2 more after that.
Well, that's 6 books. All the Poodle books make 6.
Got it.
I have 3 more after that.
Okay, go ahead.
So, okay, this one happened because I went to the Philadelphia Flower Show.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they have aisles of things you can buy, bulbs and flowers and all that. So I bought some bulbs and I was with a couple of friends. They bought the same. And after weeks, mine was not growing.
Mm-hmm.
And theirs were. And I discovered later that I planted it upside down. And I thought, this is a terrible gardening experience.
I've done that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's like, which end is up?
Yes.
So I thought, that's not too good. But it did give me the idea to write another book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called The Upside Down Gardener. And there's so much of me in the story, you know, and my life and experiences. And, you know, it gets a little magical what happens to her.
Yes.
In the story. I won't reveal the entire thing, but it has some twists and turns and some funny things about how she tries to grow her garden.
Oh, goodness.
So, but she's based on me also as a young girl. And, you know, I grew up in New York, so the story takes place there. I'll just show you this opening page was another nice illustration that my illustrator did.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
From a photograph, because she had never been to New York.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so I got her a couple of photographs and she was able to capture it very well. Very well. So that's another favorite. So that's the idea for this book.
Yeah, I love it.
Something that happened. And then being that this girl loves to play baseball, which I did too when I was a little girl. The continuation of this is that she does eventually play baseball in the next book called A Grand Slam Birthday.
Oh.
And this one is a little different because it's not an actual ballpark where you would play a game.
Yes.
It happens at a birthday party, which is rather dull. And she turns the party into a baseball game, which everybody winds up having a great time at. So that's A Grand Slam Birthday. And then the last book, which just came out this year,
Yes.
is a book about faith,
Yes.
and it's called Look Up Little Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not based on anything that happened to me. This one's based on, I found one time a journal, blank journal, and it had a cover with a little mouse on the bottom,
Okay.
and the cover was cut out. Excuse me.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me.
That's all right.
My
And if
throat.
you need to get some water, you can go ahead.
Let me sip on my tea for a second.
Okay. I love how your inspiration has come from so many different sources. And I think that's important for our listeners to understand that, you can be inspired by anything and it can lead to a story that you were not even expecting to occur. So, from the bulb going to the flower show and planting the bulb upside down, like I said, I've done that and waited the 3 to 4 years for the thing to go down and come back up. And from your dogs, from there's so many, and now as you're sharing from a journal cover, a blank journal cover at that, well, with the mouse on the bottom.
The mouse was on the bottom, and a piece of the cover was cut out as though he chewed it.
Oh,
And I thought it
neat.
was adorable. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
someday I'd like to write a story about a mouse, but I had no idea, and it was not going to be based on anything that happened to me because I didn't never had an experience with a mouse.
Yes.
So it took a lot of years, and it just actually being in church, it just kind of came to me when I was sitting there looking at the baseboards, and I thought about this mouse, and what if this mouse was in the church, and what would
Mm-hmm.
happen?
Mm-hmm.
And it started to come together.
Yes.
So it took a little while, and it took some years actually before the whole idea came together. And
Mm-hmm.
it finally did. And it's a totally different book. And in some ways, I'm not sure how to market it totally because
Okay.
it's not, it's not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's a special market that is interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a whole nother ball of wax altogether.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that. So you've done a lot of book readings and so forth in
Yes.
schools, and what's that been like for you?
It's been great because as much as I like to write, I love to talk about it too.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, I was in Virginia just last week, and I was at a school. And after we did the presentation,
Hmm.
one of the teachers tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Can you come to my classroom?" So I was like, "Sure." And I go there, and she says, "This little girl here wants to say something to you." And she didn't want to do their work. She
Yes,
wanted to write a story.
yes.
And it's so like it feels so good when you inspire somebody young,
Hmm.
or you hear like they want to share their book with
Yes,
you.
yes,
So it's very rewarding.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is.
I agree. It's amazing. During 2020, was it 2020 or 2021? Maybe it was 2021. And I had the opportunity. So I started writing stories when I was in the about second or third grade, not
Oh
with the
wow.
intention to be an author, but I just wanted to write stories and then go read them to the kindergarten, like preschool, nursery school classes. And so my teachers would allow me to do so. And so then now come full circle, my grade school, when I became an author of children's books, they invited me to do book reads for all of the grades.
How
And
nice.
yeah, so I had done them virtually. And then a few weeks later, I received a package in the mail, and all of these children have written their stories with my characters.
Oh really?
Yes, and
Oh,
I mean,
that's
I have like hundreds of stories of Froggy T and Bunny all over the place, and it was so like some of them, Froggy T and Bunny got married, some of them did, right? They it was just so incredible. And to your point, when I was doing the reads, there was no part of me thinking I might be inspiring an author. And then when I get this package and there's letters in there and thank yous, and now I'm thinking about being an author and here's my story and so
Yeah.
forth. It was, yeah, it was very, very impactful. And one father emailed me. He said, I'm so sick of hearing about Froggy T and Bunny. Every day on my day to school, I'm hearing a new story that my child has made up.
Well,
So,
you really inspire them, which is great.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
will say that, when I go to schools, teachers come up to me with their ideas. And
yeah.
like one came up to me last year and said, she was walking with a boy
Hmm.
to pass the cafeteria.
Hmm.
And the food smelled like whatever they were having that day. And the boy said, smells like a Tuesday. And she took that idea and ran off with it, with,
Wow.
trying to bottle scents that have something important to do with your
Hmm.
life. And, they ideas come from the simplest thing, like you
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. So good. So, people who are listening, please know that you can get an idea. That moment of inspiration is so important. And then moving into the action becomes even more important.
Taking that step it's a challenge because there are so many people with ideas either in their head or on their computers and they're stuck,
Yeah,
you know, and they'd like
definitely.
to write a book and like to have it published, but they're not sure what to do next.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now for you, which way did you choose to publish? Did you go traditional? Did you do independent? And why did you choose the way that you went?
Well, I chose to. I don't say self-published because I feel like I'm a writer, by background,
Yes.
and I work with a professional illustrator and a professional editor and
Yes.
professional printer. So I like to say I'm part of a little think tank,
Yes.
and that we do it, and I would give that advice to anybody that you really need to work with professional people.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because people tend to think, well, if you've done it yourself it can't be that good, and I beg to differ with that.
That's right.
I have read many a book from book fairs when my son was little that went absolutely nowhere. The story, there was no story, and I
Mhm.
thought these were published books by publishing houses, so
Yes.
there's good and bad in every
That's
way.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
Totally.
I decided I could wait and send, tons of query letters to agents or publishing houses.
Mhm.
Or if I wanted to make this happen, I could do it myself. And
Yes.
because of the marketing background and the people I knew, I
Yep.
thought I'm going to take a chance and go out and do this myself. So that's kind of how it came about.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you. For me, it was the same thing with the first book in 2009, which was an adult self-help book. I started going through the traditional route and I was like, and they're like, you got to get an agent. You got to do this. You got to
Mhm.
do this. And I'm just like, where do I find all of this? How do I make these connections? And by the time I go through all of this, will I still even be that vested in getting it done? And I felt as though my work was good and I wanted to get it out there. And a friend of mine who was an author said, well, you can self-publish. And this is before Amazon KDP, where you needed to have different agencies still take they were self-publishing agencies that would look and do the cover and all those types of things. And so I went that route and I was very pleased with it. And especially the fact that I still own the rights to
Right.
everything was important to me. And then who knew X number of years later, there would be this thing called KDP, and you could now upload your own manuscript, create your own covers, you could still hire and so forth. But one of the things that I did when I went through the other company was because they gave you a list of editors you could choose from, they gave you a list of graphic artists and so forth. I knew that the owner of the company also wrote books. And
Okay.
so I called and I said, "Who edits the owner's books?"
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
and they told me who it was and I said no problem, and that's who I reached out to,
Okay.
and she became my editor for the first two books. And this is someone who I've never met. We've only ever communicated via email. And she's someone who I have referred to many people since then because she started teaching me about the editing process, such as making sure things were being edited for content, make sure it was being edited for context, and so
Mhm.
forth. And I hadn't thought about those things. I was new, to writing. I came from a psychology background, so I only knew APA style.
Right.
And this was not an APA style type writing. And so I had to learn what this meant now to be an independent writer, so to speak.
Right. You made a good point about owning the rights to your work, which is
Mhm.
another thing I found out after I already decided to self-publish. Um, People don't own the right to their work. Once
Yeah.
you turn it over and they accept you, that's it.
Yeah.
And you can make 50 changes to suit them.
Yeah.
So there's that part. It's
Mhm.
your heart and soul that's into this,
Yeah.
right? So you have that. And then another whole area is when you find out what some authors get on their book,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's discouraging. It
Yes,
really
it is.
is. I had a friend who wrote a young adult novel. She did get an advance, so
Mhm.
that was nice. But I guess it's a hardcover. It's probably 300 pages long. And she
Mhm.
was getting 60 cents royalty per book. Now, it's crazy. So some people have
Wow.
great deals. I mean, really, like James Patterson, J.K. Rowling, they have
Right.
great deals.
Right.
But for the vast majority of authors out there, it's not as sweet as that.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And there's this misnomer that if you go traditional, that you've made it, so to
Mhm.
speak. But they have to work just as hard with marketing their books and getting it out also.
Absolutely. The marketing is not done. I mean, there might be a little marketing, but if
Hmm.
you're famous, there's lots of marketing.
Right. Right.
I always say that, first you need the fame and then they'll do a book for you.
Right.
So, yeah.
So for marketing for you, and we talked a little bit off, having a little leg up because you are familiar with marketing more than most authors are. But still, you talked about there's a learning curve for yourself as marketing yourself and your product. So what have you found to be challenges? What have you found to be successful for you? And you have different types of books as well. Like you said, this last book is very different than
Yeah.
the previous ones.
Yeah. I do a lot of email blasts, but that only gets me so far.
Mhm.
I find most of my sales come from school visits.
Okay.
And Amazon sales are, to me, they're not what they could be. That's for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then from people I meet, the network that you make, that
Yes.
helps too. But for me, it's email blasts and it's direct contact. It's direct emails to specific people
Mhm.
asking them to buy your book,
Purchase.
basically, or yeah, trying to
Yeah.
promote yourself to them.
Yeah. I was talking with some writers, and they were saying how, like, when they go to do book reads, that sometimes they will forego their speaking fee so that the school will buy the books in bulk. So
I won't do that anymore.
go go
You
ahead.
know, yeah. I mean, I had done that earlier on, and that
Mhm.
was fine. And then you realize, you know, this is your job,
Yes.
and you deserve money for what you do.
Mhm.
So I don't do it for free because I think, okay, you wouldn't do something and not get paid for it. That
Mhm.
was your job. So
Mhm.
neither do I. And there's no guarantee of book sales.
Yep.
I've been to schools where I've sold 60 books, and I've been to
Mhm.
schools where I've sold like five.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I've driven there. It's cost me gas and time and all that. So I realized, and if they don't want to do it, then I just have to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad that you shared that because a lot of times, again, as authors are just starting out, they want to get their work out there. They want to get themselves out there. And there is that question of do you, will you, and what do you compromise, if anything?
Right. Because, your worth.
Yeah.
You have worth, and that deserves something.
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, obviously, you have to price yourself within the realm of your experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't be charging $3,000 for an author visit like some famous New York Times published person can do.
Yes. Yes.
But within reason, and you start to get a feel for what that is. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you see other authors and what they charge, and look at budgets. A lot of schools will have a budget and will tell you what they can afford. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Very good information. Now, as far as social media, how are you with that? Are you utilizing that? The author I spoke to this morning, Elle Beckenstowe, she was saying that she's learning to get comfortable with doing the social media blasts and so forth.
I I actually have a young girl who helps me with that. So she does like a lot of posts on Instagram, and she does my Facebook advertising, and and I can do Facebook, but she puts together these great little posts that are cute and
Mm-hmm.
attractive and all, which is more than I probably can do. And I have a son who's good on websites and things like that. Although I
Great.
have to catch him when he's free.
Uh-huh.
But so I have some help doing that. But that does a little bit maybe. But I still, my main source is schools.
That's good to know. And
Hmm.
it's good to know for people to realize that everyone can have a different type of niche as to what works for them. Like I talk with some authors, and TikTok has been huge for
Hmm.
them. And then I've talked to others, and TikTok has been like tumbleweed, like nothing has happened
Right. Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
The same thing as you're talking about Amazon. Some people go on Amazon, excuse me, and they do the Amazon ads, and they've seen the takeoff, and then other times it hasn't
Right.
worked. So you have to figure out what works for you.
Exactly. And like you say, it's different for everybody. It's trial and error,
Yes,
really. You know,
yes.
and it's a challenge too because everything costs money, and you need your own budget to be able to do this, and that can be limiting too. So.
Yes, and I'm glad that you said that because I remember after my first book, and I was speaking with a company, and they said, "Well, what's your marketing budget?" And I was like, "My what?" So I hadn't even thought about that because as an author and as a first time author, it was just enough to do the book. Like if
Yeah.
there was this like, okay, now my book is out there and everybody's going to know, and of course they're going to run and get it because I wrote it,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then it was like, no, you got to market this thing. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And of course they were like, you pay us, we do it.
Which and there is that too. I mean, there are firms that will help you market, but
Hmm.
again, what's your budget
Yeah.
is a challenge. So, I mean, if you can throw a lot of money behind something, I'm sure you'll get better results than if you
Hmm.
couldn't. So,
Now, how are you as far as like book fairs? So obviously we met at the Plymouth meeting one. Do you attend a lot of those different types of venues?
I used to. I
Okay.
don't so much anymore because I have found that they they really don't do a whole lot for me.
Hmm.
Although I have to say, from years back, I have had a couple of inquiries, and that created like regular school visits for me.
Okay.
So there's been that.
Okay.
There's been getting the word out there from parents, and sometimes I will get a parent who's like a PTO person or something, and they will invite me into a school.
Mm-hmm.
But every road seems to lead back to schools for me.
Schools, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know your sweet spot.
It certainly is.
The trends and themes just take you back. It's funny. So I'm a former early childhood, elementary, and middle school teacher. And then when I decided I wasn't going to be in the classroom anymore, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next before getting my doctorate, I ended up working at Gap Kids.
Oh,
And I
you're
was
kidding.
like, I said, I can't get away from these doggone kids. And And then to turn around 20 years later and start writing a children's book series was like, you just can't get away from these
You
kids.
never know where life's going to take you. You
No,
really don't. Yeah.
not at all. So now you're looking at your life and you look and you say, I have 9 books. Are you
Hard to believe.
surprised?
I am surprised. And I think I never intended to be a children's author. It just
Hmm.
sort of happened. And the ideas kept coming. And I don't know where it will end or lead, but right now, um, I'm enjoying it. And again, the newest challenge is how to market the faith book.
Yeah, yeah.
It
So
is a
what?
different audience.
So talk about a little bit about that faith book for you. I mean, you told us the inspiration. Do you think you'll do more in that genre?
I don't really know. I'm going to
Okay.
see how this one goes.
Yeah.
I thought, there could be a series here on all sorts of love and hope and
Mm-hmm.
related things, but I'm going to see what happens with this one first.
Yeah.
It's going to Christian audiences, so
Mm-hmm.
they've invited into some Christian schools to do it, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But again, it's a challenge because my marketing for that, I started out sending to all sorts of publications and
yeah.
even like, Christian faith bookstores and all that, thinking, oh, this is a niche audience
Yes.
and this might be, a perfect fit. Well, it's not that easy either. So I'm back to the drawing board with that.
And I remember the same thing with mine. So my first book is entitled The Greatest Soul Journey. And the greatest is an acronym for God restores excellence, activates talents, encourages spiritual transformation.
Oh, wow.
And it's a workbook style journal where they're going through each of the words where I give a brief description and ask us, questions about each of them. And it was like, people were like, you understand everyone's not going to be open to this. Like, go to Christian bookstores and see about getting it in there. You may want to market yourself with churches and Bible study groups and things
Mhm.
like that. And I was like, again, I'm just thinking, here's a book. There's people, I can go anywhere. And it was like, no, really focus in this lane and maybe you'll have more success that
Oh,
way.
absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, sometimes it's hard to find that audience because it
Hmm.
is it is a niche market.
Yeah.
So it's not open to everybody like your other books are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the same thing. So in my so I have 5 published children's books right now, but in 2 of them, the first one mentions the word faith, and so the public schools go like that. And
Hmm.
then in the latest one, Bunny says, "I prepared, I studied, and I even prayed." And
Okay.
it's like, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" It's like, do you know how many kids before they take a test, they're like, you know.
Well, did you actually hear that?
I did.
Oh, you did.
I did,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And so they were like, so there were some teachers that told me, they're like, we can look at 3 of them, but we can't do the ones that say faith and we can't do the one that says prayer. And so it's just like, oh my word. And I've even, I've been to other states as well that have told me, because the children's books, they deal with social emotional development. So I combine my education and my psychology in
Right.
there and teach coping skills, social emotional, and so forth. And when I was doing a library event for a state, and they told me, you can't market in this state social emotional.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have to call it character development.
Hmm.
I I could not, and
Who
this
would have
was a
thought of
couple of
that?
years ago. I could not believe it, but I was pulled to the side in a helpful way, just so you know that in this state, that's a term that we're not allowed to use.
Wow.
And
Who would know that? Wow. You learn as you go.
exactly,
It
exactly.
was funny. I was at a synagogue once, their preschool,
Uh-huh.
and we were there. I was there with the Poodle Posse books, and they said, "Well, what about the whole series?" I said, "Well, there is a Christmas book," and they said, "Well, how Christmassy is it?" And I said, "Well, there's Santa," and they said, "No, that's a little too much for us." So,
Okay, yeah, so you never know, and you have to it there's some ways I will say where you have to brace yourself because you don't know the feedback that you're going to get, and sometimes it's very surprising. Not that it's negative, but it's just an awareness that it's like I would have never taken that into consideration.
Right,
And right, and you're
right.
thinking, well, this is a good thing, and it's like somewhere somehow someone may find some fault with it.
Right, and you learn as you go. I mean, you don't know all of these things
Yeah.
when you start out, and little by little, you know, sort of how to hone in on what's right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so, I love this about authors. There is a tenacity and a perseverance when being an author because you don't know what you're going to come up against. Like you say, you don't know what you know,
Right.
right? You're not
Right.
aware until you become aware. And so, but you continue to move forward. So, what's next for you?
Well, I think right now I'm trying to market the newest book and
Yeah,
all the others as well. And, you know, I'm always trying to figure out how, like you said, like to use social media
yeah.
to try to get more direct book sales than from schools. Because there is that other component, and there are successful people
Hmm.
who are published themselves who do well on Amazon and do
Yeah,
well, you know. So that's always the challenge and the question for me
yeah.
is how to get more direct sales.
Okay.
So that's always a thing to work on.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now tell me this with and I'm specifically thinking of the Poodle series just because it already is a series, but obviously with this new one that may be. Have you thought about doing any animation with them?
The poodle one I thought of. I even thought about a like a almost like a video game, like where with the
Oh,
missing steak bone, like
oh
you
yeah.
get to different levels and all that.
Oh, that's
Um,
cute.
yeah, but again, that requires a pretty large investment.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, when you say animation, what do you mean?
Yeah, so for my first one, the reunion, I had it turned into an animation as well. So it is, the frog is Froggy T, he's jumping, he's talking, he's walking through. So it's very Disney-like looking. So it was a whole another experience to go from them being in my head to now them being illustrated to now them being animated.
Well, where do you find
Again.
the animated on online
So
or
I found so my animated, yes, I have a Froggy T and Bunny YouTube channel.
YouTube channel? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that, have you created a channel, a YouTube channel or anything for yours?
No, but that gives me a great idea. There's another
Good.
thing to work on. You know what I did do like during COVID.
Yeah.
I did read my stories on a YouTube
Yes.
channel for kids. So there was that, but that's really all the YouTube things I've done. But
Okay.
that's a good idea. I
Yeah.
might
So
steal that from you.
no, you go on. I'm sharing. That's why I'm here to help share and spark the creativity and give these children and people more positive and healthy things to watch. If they're going to spend some time, get some screen time, I want them to get healthy screen time with things that they're watching,
True,
right?
true enough. Yeah.
And so yeah, so originally I had the animation on what is it? Vimeo, which is a video platform. And then I took it and I decided to put it on YouTube as a way for exposure. And I think I just uploaded it recently, maybe a couple months ago, so that people are just able to go on and see it. And I've also, being a former educator, I wanted the books all to come in different formats so that I could meet the different learning styles,
That's great.
right?
Yeah.
So you have some people who like print and they want to hold that book and go through it. And then you have some who prefer the ebook, which is fine. And then you have those who like the animation. And I opted to actually have the words of the book pop up as well,
Okay.
which for me, from an education standpoint, helps with timing and pacing and pronunciation and fluency and all of that. So it works out really good for the students to have, or the children to have a different experience
Hmm.
of the story. Um, when I was doing the virtual book reads, I would read the story first and show the illustrations on screen, and then I would show the animation, and then we would talk about the difference between the two.
You see, you're from an education and psych background, but you do good marketing as well. So even though you didn't study it, maybe you're good at it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a great opportunity to, like I said, just really embed the story and the values more and more. And so I'm excited about all of your work and the ways in which it can continue to grow and become a part of people's lives.
Right. And it's, again, that's always growing and changing. And, you never know who you meet. It takes you on this curvy road and, you wind up doing something you never thought you'd do or with the books.
Yes.
So it's great. And
Yeah.
then you meet these kids who are funny, which
Yes.
is really interesting. But the one comment I will never forget is
Uh-huh.
the one boy said to me, Mrs. Smith, you look a lot older in person than you did in your book. And I'm thinking, thanks, kid.
Right. Now go away.
Exactly.
Too much. Now, do you have any additional events coming up this year?
Like book fairs or things
Yes.
like that.
Yes, or places where you'll be and or reads that you'll be doing.
I don't have anything scheduled right now.
Okay.
Um, like I said, I don't do as many of those as I used to do.
Yes.
But you have to pick and choose those too. Some of them are probably very good for you. And again, it's different for everybody. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's so true because I had done Collingswood. I did Collingswood last year and it rained, so it was indoor.
Mm-hmm. I've
But
done that
you
there.
have, a
Mm-hmm.
and we did well, it was good, but the thing that I would say that really came from that was my husband's idea for me to do this right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have been doing Dr. Walls and Friends YouTube show since 2012, but
Wow.
I hadn't dedicated anything specific to authors.
Okay.
And so I was like, this was my takeaway. And so then we did Collingswood this year, and it was outside, and the weather, it was one of those gorgeous Saturdays where the weather was perfect and it was crowded, but I was not the genre of choice,
Yeah.
right?
It's hard because, there are so many authors there.
Yes.
And actually, it was funny because this weekend there was a book fair at Doylestown Library.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
signed up
Uh-huh.
because in the past I didn't go because they had so many authors in such a small space. And I thought, you're not going to get any time with anybody really. It's
Yeah.
it's very hard. So their view was, okay, let's do more of these and have fewer authors in each one. And I thought,
Uh-huh.
great idea. Well, this year they were back to 90 authors packed into a library. And I thought, no, I'm not going. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So, I pick and choose really
Yeah.
what I will go to. And that's experience learned. I
Yes.
mean, in the beginning, you sign up for everything because you want
Yep.
to get out there. And then you start thinking, well, I might sell one or two books and it's
Yeah.
worth my time to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the truth, and you do. And you have to find out again, right, what works for you. And everybody's story is going to be different. There are some people who go to these different author events and they make out wonderfully every
Hmm.
time it seems like they go. And you have to decide what are you going for. If you're going for exposure, like I started making brochures to hand out to people. So even if they didn't buy, at least they were leaving with a piece of information, because to your point, you never know who's with the PTO, you never know who's the principal, you never know
Right.
who's going to pass your information forward. So we need to make sure you make those contacts. For me, being able to meet you and meet the other authors, that now I have an opportunity to talk to each of you and learn about your author's journey and introduce you to more people and more work. So people who are listening and watching, please go out and get her books, and they can get your books from Amazon or
Amazon or my website.
or from your
Well-worded
website.
book. Yeah.
Yep. And
Yep.
so I put the link in the chat room and also in the write up. So if you come on over to this YouTube side of life at Ask Dr. Walls 525, when you look in the write up, you will see the link for her website. So you can go right on there and purchase the book. These will make great books for gifts coming up. We're coming into the holiday season, but also just period in life to have on the shelf. One of the things that I love is upstairs in my house, I have all of the children's books that we had growing up.
I
And
do too. Yes. My favorite stories are still sitting there. So,
yes,
mhm.
it's amazing. And so sometimes I'll pull one and I read it and I laugh and I go, no wonder why you write the way that you write. Like you were influenced.
Inspired. Yeah.
Definitely. Not
Yeah.
even realizing that it would have come out this way, 40 years later, but here we
Yeah.
are nonetheless.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So any final words for people, words of inspiration or information that you would like them to know before we close out for this evening?
I think, if you have an idea, I think it's worth pursuing because, again, you never know where that's going to lead. Even if it's a vanity project and you're doing it just for yourself,
Hmm.
there's a real sense of satisfaction from doing it and seeing your name on the cover and people wanting it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your author's journey. It has truly been a pleasure to get to speak to you longer than just in passing at a vending event.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. As I mentioned earlier in the show, or rather in this morning's show, this is a power packed week filled with a bunch of authors. I'll be back tomorrow at 12 noon with Sherry, and she has a historical novel. And then on Thursday evening at 8 p.m., I'll be with Gil, and he'll be talking about his weight loss journey and his book. And more than just the physical weight did he lose. And then on Friday at 5, I'll be talking with Nicole, and she's a horror writer. So y'all might see me get a little bit scared. Horror is not my thing, but I'll talk to an author. So I look forward to you all coming back. If you haven't subscribed, please be sure to subscribe to Ask Dr. Walls 525. And I'll see you all real soon. And as always, God bless and continue to live your greatest life. Talk to you soon.
Okay. All right.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye bye.